Good. Good morning, everyone. I think we are live. Welcome. Hello. I thank you for joining us at Positioning That Clicks with April Dunford. My name is Carla Otto, and I'm the Director of Regional Innovation Networks here at Alberta Innovates. Before we begin, and as people are signing in, I'm going to cover off a few housekeeping items. If you notice at the bottom of your screen, there are engagement tools you can use. All the engagement tools are resizable and movable, so feel free to move them around and get them in your most comfortable outlook for you. You can either expand the speaker view or the slide view to fully cover the screen by clicking the arrows in the top right corner. For this talk, I highly recommend being able to see the highly dynamic April Dunford. If you have any questions during the webcast, you can submit them through the question and answer tool. April will address the questions for the last 15 minutes of the session. I'm just hearing a bit of feedback, so I wanted to make sure I don't have any on the other side. The group chat box is also a useful tool to connect with other participants. I would encourage you to use the tool to discuss the session topic, but please don't let it distract you from the presentation. Also, I have 100 free books ready to send to 100 attendees of today's talk. So watch the chat. Sandra Milne from our Medicine Hat Regional Innovation Network, APEX, will be posting a link in the chat during the talk, and books will be sent to the first 100 attendees that complete the form. For the best viewing experience, we recommend that you close any programs or browser sessions running in the background that could cause issues. You can find additional answers to some of the common technical questions located in the help tool at the bottom of your screen. Now I'd like to introduce our main event and the Alberta Innovation Network keynote speaker. The Alberta Innovation Network is a collaborative infrastructure working behind the scenes for the last 10 years to support Alberta technology entrepreneur ecosystem. It includes 8 regional innovation networks, or RINs, around the province that work with entrepreneurs to close gaps in community-based ecosystems and accelerate their businesses. They work towards a culture of collaboration within the regions and around the province, connecting entrepreneurs to the right resources at the right time. Today's event is sponsored by Alberta Innovates and Western Economic Diversification and is brought to you in conjunction with Growth Catalyst and the Growth and Resiliency Speaker Series. With that, I bring April Dunford. Her full biography is in a box on your screen, but for those of you joining directly from another meeting or forgetting why you put this in your calendar, here are a few quick highlights. She has repositioned and launched 16 products with a current focus on helping early and growth stage startups. She has led large teams at IBM and Sybase and others. And what will make this talk most engaging is her curiosity and humor. She truly loves what she does and enjoys a good laugh. If you want more details than what is presented in this talk, she's also the author, yes, an engineer can write, of Obviously Awesome. As mentioned earlier, watch the chat for a chance to get a free copy. Take it away, April.
Hey, thanks so much, Carla. I appreciate it. Can everybody hear me and see me? I hope so. I'm going to assume yes and just barrel on with this thing. So a couple of little things I want to talk to you about first. I'm going to give this talk. If you look at the bottom, there's a little Q&A button. And if you click that, there's a spot in there where you can enter questions. So if you have questions as I go through, put it in. I'm going to hustle through a bit of a presentation here. So I'm going to talk at you for the first little bit. After that, we're going to switch over to questions, and I'm going to take your questions, and we'll see if there's lots of questions. Maybe we don't get through all of them, but we'll do our best. So we'll move to that. All right. So let's talk about positioning. So positioning is, man, it's a misunderstood topic. And you know, I'm a positioning expert. So one of the hard things about being a positioning expert is the first thing you have to do is you have to explain to everybody what the heck your thing even is. And so I do a lot of talks about positioning, and it is so misunderstood that one of the first things I usually talk about is what positioning is not. So it is not the same thing as your tagline. It's not the same thing as messaging. That gets confused a lot. My personal pet peeve is brand positioning. There is branding and there is positioning. Those two things are actually completely separate. In fact, everything on this slide, these are things that flow from positioning, but positioning actually has to come first. So it's a little bit, you can think of it this way. If everything you do in marketing and sales is the house, positioning is the foundation upon which the house is built. Here's a definition. So I define it this way. Positioning defines how our product is the best in the world at providing something that a well-defined set of customers cares a lot about. Now, that's a bit of a mouthful. And a lot of times, you know, I have a background in marketing, but most of the companies that I work with are startups, and startup founders tend to have technical backgrounds. So I keep trying to come up with new analogies for positioning that would make sense to folks that maybe don't know too much about marketing. Lately, the one that I love the most is it's like a bit like the opening scene of a movie. So think about it this way, you know, the opening scene of a movie, you walk in off the street, you sit down in the movie theater. Like we don't anymore, right? Now we go to the basement to watch movies, but pretend we're still going to movie theater. So you go to the movie theater, you sit down, and the opening scene is usually like a pan of the city skyline, right? Like it'll be like city skyline, oh, Empire State Building, we're in New York, or city skyline, oh, Golden Gate Bridge, we're in San Francisco. And the reason they do that is I got to get oriented in where are we, what's going on, what's the time frame before I can kind of settle in and enjoy the details of the story. This is a frame from the opening scene of Apocalypse Now. So this is widely regarded one of the most masterful opening scenes in movie history. And it starts with kind of this shot of the beach, and the beach looks nice, and there's palm trees, and there's tinkly music. And you might be thinking, hey, you know, maybe it's not apocalypse right now. Maybe it's apocalypse like 20 minutes from now or something. And then gradually the music gets a little bit more intense. We start to see something that looks like dust. And then we realize, oh, that's smoke. And then a helicopter goes whipping by, and then boom, the beach is on fire. And slowly it then switches to our lead character. And so we get this shot of a hotel room, and the hotel room is terrible. We have our lead character who is drinking and smoking and clearly in distress. And he walks over to the window and he peeks out, and we get the first line of dialogue, which is actually his thoughts of the movie. He looks out and he says, Saigon, poo. He doesn't say poo, but this is a family show. Saigon, poo. I'm still only in Saigon. Every time I think I'm going to wake up back in the jungle. Okay, so here we are. We're 2 minutes, 35 seconds into the movie, and we know everything we need to know. We know we're in the middle of the Vietnam War. Our lead character, we're specifically in Saigon. Our lead character has been there before. He's coming back for the second time, third time. The first times weren't good. He's in distress. He's got major PTSD. We have the mood of this movie. It is not going to be a laugh riot. Good. Now I can settle in and pay attention to all the details of the story. So, you work in tech, why am I telling you this? The point of this is that context helps customers understand what they need to have to pay attention to. Now, when we think about how we do this for products, if we're selling technology products, if we look at the research around this, how do people figure out context for a tech product? I don't get to see the city skyline, but what's my equivalent of that for a tech product? And there's a couple of things. Like basically, people look at market categories. So market categories are kind of a shorthand way to help people figure out what to pay attention to. And it works kind of like this. So this slide is an example of a market. This isn't even all the market. Like if you think of all the software to solve all the problems on the planet, this is one guy's attempt to figure out how to model just one tiny corner of that universe, so just marketing problems. So here's your market. It's terrible. Look at that. There's 8,000 companies on there. If I'm a buyer of marketing products, how do I figure out what I should pay attention to in there? There's 8,000 things. There's way too many things. I need to make a short list of 2 or 3. Now, here's where market categories come in. So if you look at that slide, you can see that even the guy that invented this slide, he's trying to make sense of it or help you with that by splitting it into market categories. He's got macro ones and micro ones. The macro ones are the colors. So the red stuff is advertising and promotion. The orange stuff is content and experience. So let's say, and then inside there, you can see there's these micro categories. So let's say I'm a vice president of marketing. I wake up in the morning and I'm like, you know what I need? I need live chat on the website. I got to figure that out. So I look at this and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to pay attention to in here, but I don't know. It kind of sounds like social and relationships. And oh yeah, good. There's a box in there called bots and live chat. Fantastic. Now I don't have to pay attention to 8,000 things anymore. I only have to pay attention to, to be honest, it's still not great. There's way too many things in there, but I've narrowed it down a bit. Now, importantly, that's not all market categories do. It's good. They shorten down the competitive list. But what they actually do is they set off a really powerful set of assumptions in the minds of customers about what your product is all about. So it works a little bit like this. Let's say I'm doing a pitch contest, or like I'm on that show. What is it? Dragon's Den, Shark Tank. I don't know. One of them's it's Shark Tank in the US, Dragon's Den here. So Dragon's Den, I go on the show, except it's weird Dragon's Den. So I go in and all I'm allowed to tell you is my market category and that's it. All right. So I walk in, I'm like, hey, Dragons, I'm on TV, fantastic. I'm here to pitch you my revolutionary, fantastic, next generation, super innovative CRM, customer relationship management, CRM. And that's it. That's all I get to give you. That's it. Now, who's my competitor? Well, it's Salesforce. They're the leader in that market, the undisputed leader in that market is Salesforce. So I must compete with them, right? What features does my product have? Well, it must track accounts, track deals across a pipeline. That's what we expect a CRM to do. What is the title of the person I sell my CRM to? Well, that's the sales manager. Vice president of sales. That's who buys a CRM. Now here's where it gets crazy. What's my price? How would you know that? I didn't tell you anything. I didn't tell you a thing about my product. You don't know one thing. But I told you it was a CRM. If I assume you compete with Salesforce and I assume Salesforce is the leader in that market, then you must cost less than that. So here's how this works. If I position my product in a way that it sets off a set of assumptions about my product that are true, great. I just save my marketing and sales teams a lot of hassle. I don't have to tell you who I compete with. It's assumed. I don't have to list every single feature my product has. Half of that stuff is table stakes. Unfortunately, it works the exact same way if we do a bad job of it. So if I position my product in a market category such that it sets off a set of assumptions about my product that are not true, now my marketing and sales team is going to have their work cut out for them, undoing the damage that my positioning has already done. Let me give you an example of that, just to make it real. I got this call once from a guy in the Valley. I used to work for him, and now he's a VC. So he writes checks for startups. And he says, look, April, I just invested in these folks. I love them. And I love them because their customers love them. I talk to their customers. They love them. The problem is when they first talk to a new customer or when they're running marketing campaigns, nobody knows what the heck they do. So can you help them out? I said, yeah, sure. Guys call me. We get on the phone. I said, okay, pitch me your stuff. Like, what do you do? And the guy says, well, we're lawyers, ex-lawyers, but we got this idea for a thing and it's email for lawyers. And I'm like, email for lawyers. That's like, who knew the lawyers needed their own email? But okay, email for lawyers. Fine. I'm not a lawyer. Thank God. So fine. Email for lawyers. I got it. So then they jump into a demo and they start showing me this demo and it looks cool. There's kind of like an inbox there and the lawyers and the clients are talking. And I'm like, hey, that's cool. This email for lawyers. Like, how does the calendar work on this thing? And the guy says, oh no, we don't have a calendar. And I'm like, wait a minute. How can you not have a, wait, how does that work? Like, how do you replace Gmail for the lawyers if you don't have a calendar? And they're like, we don't compete with Gmail. They keep Gmail and they use us too. I'm like, you're telling me the lawyers need 2 emails? That doesn't make any sense to me. And I'm like, okay, back up. So your investor says, customers love you. Why do they love you so much? And he says, well, we've got this thing. We have a patent on it. It's amazing. And we call it super secure, context aware file sharing. So what it does is it's got some AI and it knows there's documents that need to be shared between the lawyers and their clients. It automatically figures out who should have access to that, puts it in a super secure place, and only those people get access. Nobody else does. Like, that's actually super cool. That sounds really cool. I bet the lawyers love that. They're like, oh yeah, the lawyers love it. It's amazing, but it is also not email. If I wanted to solve that problem, would I go looking for email to solve it? No. So what these folks have is this amazing, innovative product masquerading as crappy email. Now, what if I picked it up and what if I put it in a different market? So what if I said, hey, you know what? This thing is not email for lawyers. It's team collaboration for lawyers. Now that's different. Different set of assumptions there. Product's the same. I just repositioned it. It's team collaboration for lawyers. Now who do I compete with? It's not Gmail. It's Slack, Microsoft Teams, maybe. One of those things. And what would I expect you to have in terms of features and functions? Well, some kind of cool, nifty collaboration thing that the lawyers care about. And that's exactly what they've got. Super secure, context-aware, file sharing thing. You know what else is great about this repositioning? When your email is hard to charge for that. Team collaboration, we're used to paying for that. So these guys repositioned it, put their price up, and sold way more. So this is how this works. Now, if we believe this is important, how do we actually get it done? And in my opinion, there's 2 things. Like, the first thing is we have to be conscious of positioning. We have to actually think about positioning the thing we have. Most of the time we don't. Just like the lawyers, they're like, we got an idea for this thing. We think it's email. And they never question that. And so they end up building a thing that, you know, maybe it's better contextualized in a different way. So first of all, we got to position deliberately. Secondly, if we're going to do it, we need to follow a process. I'll give you an example about this deliberate positioning thing. And again, this is another one from my own experience. So early in my career, I got hired as the vice president of marketing for this startup. And it was a database startup. It was founded by a couple of guys with PhDs in database science, and they built this funky database. And what it could do is, if you had mountains and mountains of data, this thing could do a certain kind of analytic query on it really, really fast. So our first customer was Bank of Montreal, and they had a query that took so long to do that they used to run it on the weekend because it took 12 hours to run this query because it's cranking so much data. And we could do it in 3 minutes. It's like magic. So I get hired, and my job is to sell the magic database thing. Let's get a whole bunch of leads for that. So I'm good vice president of marketing. I get in, I spin up all these marketing campaigns, and after 2 months, I realized, like, nobody responds to any of my campaigns. Literally everything is failing. Like, I send emails, no one opens them. I have webinars, no one attends. We used to go to trade shows. It was terrible. No one would talk to us. They would, like, people would literally come to the booth and be like, hey, so what do you guys do? And we're like, hey, we're this fancy new database. And people would literally be looking over us and saying, Microsoft's got T-shirts, you know, and like running over to the, like, it was terrible. So I can't figure this out because our tech is so amazing. What it does is so cool. How come nobody loves us? So I talked to the head of sales and I said, hey, I want to go on some sales meetings because I don't understand what's going on here. My marketing stinks. And so he sets up a bunch of meetings across a week and I tag along. And so the first meeting I go to runs like this. So we walk into the meeting, and my sales guy, he's really good. He plugs in, we're going to do this meeting. And then the customer walks in, and it's usually the CIO and a bunch of database people. So I got this chief information officer and a bunch of database people. They all walk in, and my rep stands up and says, okay, glad you're all here. Fantastic. I'm here to talk to you about this revolutionary next generation, super amazing database. And you can see the minute he says that word, everybody in the room literally kind of does this thing where they lean back and go, yeah. And I'm like, oh no, we've lost them. And then my rep is like, no, you don't understand. Super database, super amazing database. And he starts talking about, we have all these PhDs and we have patents and we have all this cool stuff. It's amazing. And we had a 54 slide sales deck, 54 slides. We get to like slide 3, and the senior person in the room, she puts her hand up and she's like, yeah, we got, hey, that database thing, it sounds good. But you know what we don't need right now? We don't need a database. We have a database. It's called Oracle. In fact, everybody in this room is certified on Oracle. And you know what? We're not totally married to it. Like we understand your thing might have some cool stuff, but we can't go switch in databases because we've already got one. And what we'd really like for you to do is to just get the hell out. She kicked us out, and then we were gone, and then we went to the car, and we were very sad. And so I said to my rep, I'm like, man, that was rough. Like, do your sales calls often go like this? And he said, yeah, pretty much every time. And I'm like, why are we doing sales calls? We should be getting our resumes together because we're all going to get fired because we're not going to sell any of this thing. So needless to say, we were bummed out. And we did a whole bunch of meetings, and every single one was the same until we did the last meeting of the week. We get this sales meeting, and it's with the CIO of a very big insurance company. And so we walk in there, and he shows up, and it's just him. So he hasn't brought his team, I think, because the reason he took the call was he's like a friend of our CEOs. So he basically agreed to this meeting as a favor. So he didn't bring his team because he figured nothing good was going to happen. He didn't want to waste their time. Anyways, we walk into the meeting, we set up, my rep goes, this guy's very nice and polite. He leans back, and my rep gets all the way through all 54 slides right to the end. And then we look at the guy and we're like, okay, what do you think? And the guy leans back and he goes, I love it. I love it. It's amazing. I've never seen anything so amazing. Oh my gosh, where do I buy it? It's fantastic. I got to get you guys back here next week to meet with the rest of my team. It's the greatest thing I ever seen. And we're all excited. Like, yay, people love our stuff. Yay, we're going to, oh, this is great. And then he says this bit at the end. He goes, you know what though? I got about slide 10. The light came on for me because before that, I could not figure out what you guys were. But then at slide 10, the light came on, and I realized that you guys aren't a database at all. And we're like, yay, what? And he says, no, you're not a database at all. And I'm like, but wait a minute. So what are we? And he says, you're not a database. Databases do all kinds of things. You guys do this one thing really, really good, and that's analytics. And if I want analytics, I buy myself a business intelligence tool or a data warehouse. That's not a database. You're not a database. And I had only been with the company a couple of months. My first instinct was to have an argument with that guy. I was like, what do you mean? And so we had a little back and forth. And then finally he said, look, you're not a database, and you should believe me because I'm your customer. And by the way, like, you're out here trying to sell this thing. What did you say you were? Vice president of marketing? You don't even know who you are. How'd you get that job? And I was simultaneously happy and sad. So we went back to the office, and this sparked a discussion internally about our positioning. We'd always thought of ourselves as databases. We were database people making a database. But what we realized is that contextually, that was bad context for our customers. They didn't understand what we were. So we repositioned ourselves as a data warehouse, actually, a data warehouse for machine-generated data is what we ended up being. And that completely changed our conversations with customers. We'd walk in and we'd say, hey, we're a data warehouse for machine-generated data. And all the database people, they knew what a data warehouse was, but they didn't have one yet. So all the database people were like, ooh, data warehouse for machine-generated data. That sounds cool. Keep talking. And two things happened. One, we could get to the end of 54 slides. And two, we actually got to sell some things. So first thing, you got to position deliberately. Second thing, you got to follow a process. Now, this vexed me for a long time. How do you actually do positioning? If you go to marketing school, which I actually have a degree in systems design engineering from the University of Waterloo, which is like the opposite of marketing school. But I ended up having this job in marketing really early in my career. And I thought, man, I better learn something about marketing before they figure out and fire me. And so I went to marketing school and I read a whole bunch of books and I took a bunch of courses. And this concept of positioning kept coming up. And when we talked about it, when I said, how do we do this? Professors would show me this thing. So the first time I saw it, I was taking a class at Northwestern University. It's like fancy marketing school in the United States. And the professor says, today we're going to learn about positioning. And he puts this thing up. And it's like Mad Libs, fill in the blanks kind of thing. Like, we are a blank that does blank for blankety blank, blank, blank. And what you're supposed to do is just fill in the blanks, write it down. Now, imagine, I'm the lawyers. There's a blank there that says market category. How do I know if the blank is email or team collaboration? How do I know? Nothing in this exercise. This is like writing positioning down. This is not actually doing positioning. So I'm at the back of the class and I'm kind of a smart ass, right? So I put my hand up and I'm like, hey, like, I just repositioned this thing, and I'm telling them about the product I just repositioned. And like, you got a blank there that says market category. How do I know? How do I know which the right one? Because any product can be positioned in multiple different marketing categories. So how do I know what the best one is to put in that slot? And you know what the guy said to me? He like gave me this whole professor thing. He had glasses, he put his glasses down. He got all squinty at me and he was like, who said that? And I'm like, me, I'm at the back. And he's like, and what was the question? And I'm like, how do you know? How do you know what goes in that thing? And he says, trust me, April, you'll just know. And I was like, I get this. I know what's happening here. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. There is no way to do this. So, one of the things I got in engineering school was, kind of a big ego. And the second thing I got was this idea that, how hard could this be? I could figure this out. I positioned a couple of things. I could figure this out. So here's how I reasoned it out. I took a bit of an engineering approach to this at the beginning. I said, you know what? What if we could take positioning, split it into its component pieces, figure out the best answer for each component piece, and then put it together. Voila, good positioning. Okay. So, and it's pretty easy to break positioning down. It's the one thing the positioning statement is good for, is it identifies what the components are. Those are the blanks. So there's 5 components. 1, competitors or competitive alternatives. 2, features. What unique features do you have? 3, value. What is the value that you enable or your product enables for customers? Why do they care? 4, what kind of customers are we talking about? Who's my ideal customer profile? 5 is market category. So I got these 5 things. All I got to do is figure out the right answer for each one and then stick it together. Then we'd have a methodology to do this. But here's where things get tricky. If you do that, the first thing you'll notice is each of the 5 things has a relationship to the other. Didn't teach you that in marketing school, did they? No, they didn't. Let's pick anything. Value. The unique value that my product can deliver to customers is utterly dependent on my unique features or capabilities, right? So those 2 things are related, but my unique features or attributes are only unique when I compare them to a competitor. So those 3 things are related. And then if I get thinking about customer segment, my best fit customers, these are the people that care a lot about the unique value that I can deliver. That's related too. And then market category, this is like the hardest one, but theoretically, my best market category is the context I weave around my product such that this value is obvious to these people, my target segments. So it's dependent on those two things. I can't figure out best market category until I have these other two things. So where do I start? And this is a question that vexed me, and I'm not kidding, 2 years. So for 2 years, while I was working as vice president of marketing, I didn't think there was a good starting point on this wheel, and you just picked a spot, you worked your way around. What you got was candidate positioning. You went out to the market, you tested it. If it worked, great, you used it. If it didn't, you threw it out, you came back and you worked your way around the wheel again. Now, that sounds good, but let me tell you, it's not when you're the vice president of marketing and your founder, CEO is like, TikTok lead generation machine, we don't have time to keep testing these candidates. Give me the one that works. And so this made my life bad. And so after a while, what happened, and it's a long story, but I met a guy who was one of the early people working on jobs to be done. And this is, and if you read Clayton Christensen or any of that jobs to be done theory, so I went way down the rat hole in jobs theory. And when I came up out of there, I decided, actually, you have to start with competitive alternatives. If you don't, then what you get is positioning that sounds very good inside the office. But when you take it out to the market, it doesn't win because it's not differentiated. So we actually have to do it this way. We start with competitive alternatives and we say, okay, who do I got to beat? And then I say, all right, what are the features I have that they don't have? That gets me unique attributes. Then once I've got that, I can say, well, these features translate into value. So I can take each feature and say, so what for customers? That's going to get me my distinct value. Once I have value, then I can say, well, who cares a lot about that value? What are the characteristics of a target customer that makes them care about that value? That's how I do customer segmentation. And then once I have that, I can say, all right, what's my market category that makes this value obvious to these people? Now, that isn't to say there isn't 1,000 gotchas in this thing. There is. So the most common one is the first step, ironically, which is this competitive alternatives. And this is where I used to mess this up a lot early in my career. There's a difference between competitors and competitive alternatives. Jobs theory teaches you this. So here's how this works. When you're selling something into an account, there's typically a status quo thing in there. Like they have the problem. They're solving it some way. A lot of times they're not doing that with software or tech at all. Sometimes they're solving it with a spreadsheet or an intern or just a bunch of paper and manual processes. And that counts too for a competitor, because if you're trying to sell software in there to replace that, you've got to prove why you're better than that. So a lot of startups I work with make this mistake. They'll come to me and they'll say, hey, I've got this positioning, and I just want to check it out with you. And I say, okay, well, who do you compete with? And they'll say, well, there's all these little startups, they give me this big list of startups nobody's ever heard of. And I'm like, okay, we got all these little startups. And I'm like, so how are you better than them? And they'll say, well, ease of use. That's my thing, ease of use. Those guys, it takes 15 clicks to do a thing. But with us, you can do it in 2 clicks. So ease of use is our jam. That's why you use us. It's saving time, easy use. And then I say, hey, you ever lost a deal to any of those guys? They all look pretty small. And they'll say, no. So they're not your competitors then. You're not actually losing deals. Look, if you didn't exist, what would your customers be doing? And the answer is, well, they'd be using a spreadsheet. Or the one I get a lot is they'd hire an intern to do it. Now think about it. Your whole positioning is around ease of use, but your real competition is Joey, the intern. Do you know what's really easy to use? Joey, the intern. It doesn't get any easier than that. You're just like, hey, Joey, get me a coffee, fill out that spreadsheet while you're at it, come back when you're done. Like, you're never going to be the intern on ease of use. The flip side is there's lots of things Joey stinks at. Joey makes mistakes. Joey can't remember a customer profile the way a piece of software would. Joey quits on you. You got to understand who you compete with in order to do the rest of this downstream. Now, anyways, there's lots of other ways to mess that up. Carla mentioned earlier that she's given away copies of my book. At some point, they're going to put a link in there and you can fill out, and I think a bunch of people are going to get one. Otherwise, you can buy it on Amazon and cost a whopping $7, but if you do the ebook. But anyways, if you want to go way down the rat hole on positioning and figure out all the gory details, that's a way to do it. I'm going to give you one last story before we wrap up and we go to questions. But I like this story. It's an old story. I tell it all the time, but it's because it's a good one. This is a story about a time when I joined a company, and the company was positioned as enterprise CRM, customer relationship management. Now, we think about Salesforce in that market now, but this was a long time ago, and Salesforce was only selling to small businesses at that point. And the enterprise CRM market was utterly dominated by this giant company called Siebel. So Siebel does enterprise CRM. We're positioning ourselves as enterprise CRM. So unsurprisingly, whenever we get a meeting with a client, the first question we get is, so how are you better than Siebel? And the answer to that question was, we kind of just weren't. Like, they were better than us in almost every way. Like, they had 8,000 employees. I think I was employee 21. They had 2 billion revenue. We did like $1.5 million or something. They had 400 customers. We had 5. So everything they did was better. However, we had 2 things that were differentiating that we were very proud of. The first one was we had this feature where you could model relationships in a different way. We thought it was cool, and we always showed it to people. But, if I back up and refreshed you on this process here, we understood who our competitors were. We understood what the unique attribute was. It was this modeling thing. We did not know what the value was. That was our fundamental issue. So whenever we went in to show it to customers, it demoed great too. So we always put it in the demo. We'd show it. We'd say, hey, we've got this thing and you can model relationships like this. Is fantastic. And customers would look at it and they'd say, yeah, that looks cool. What do you use that for? And we'd say, anything you want. And then they'd say, what else do you got? And then we would hit them with our second differentiator, which was, we were always running out of money. And so if you asked us for a discount, we'd give you a whopper. So we were just really, really cheap. At one point, I remember we were pitching to a senior guy at an insurance company, and we showed him the feature, and he wasn't impressed. And then we talked about the pricing, and he said, oh, I get what you guys are. You guys are like a cheap, crappy Siebel. That wasn't funny. Anyway, so needless to say, things aren't going so good. And here's how we got out of this one was a lot of good luck. So, and it started with, we hired a new sales rep, and, because our sales reps kept quitting on us because we couldn't sell anything. So we got a new sales rep, and we were looking for a new sales rep. This guy comes to the interview, and the CEO of my company was notorious for being kind of a jerk in interviews. So the new sales rep comes in for the interview. My CEO leans over and he bangs on the table and he's like, give me one good reason why we should hire you to be a sales rep at our company. And the sales rep was from New York and he had a bit of an attitude. And so he got right up in my CEO's face and he said, I'm going to give you one good reason. The good reason is my buddy is the head of investment banking at Goldman Sachs, and I'm going to get you a meeting. And we were like, that sounds good. Let's hire that guy. And we did. So we hired the guy. And then we got the meeting at Goldman Sachs. So I tagged along for the meeting just because I wanted to see what that office looks like. And it's fancy. This guy had a helicopter pad outside his office. That's how fancy it was. Anyway, so we go in there. We go to have the meeting with the head of investment banking at Goldman Sachs. My rep's fantastic. He goes in and he does the demo. It looks great. demos this feature though, and the guy gets really excited. He's like, oh my gosh, does that mean if these two people, used to work together, but they don't anymore, you can model that? And we're like, yeah. And he's like, if they both belong to the same country club, you can model that? We're like, yeah. He's like, whoa, hang on, I need the vice president. Runs down the hall, comes back with 3 guys. So show him the thing. So we showed them the feature, and then everybody got really excited, and they were all like, oh boy, this is so good, and they're all jumping up and down, and we closed the deal. We're all excited. We're like, hey, this never happened before. Maybe investment bankers really like our stuff. So we try getting a meeting with another investment bank. We managed to get a meeting with Merrill Lynch. Same thing happens. We go in, we show them the thing, everybody gets all excited, close the deal. So things are going better. But here's what happened next. We got this idea, maybe our positioning is bad. We've been calling ourselves enterprise CRM all along. Maybe we're CRM for investment banks. Now that might not sound like a big change to you, but let me tell you, it was a big change for us. Like at the beginning, people were nervous about that. They're like, enterprise is a big market. Investment bank's a tiny market. How are we ever going to make any money there? And the way I reasoned it out was, look, the hardest thing about selling investment banks is getting the meeting. If we say we're for investment banks, maybe they'll find us. So then we went to convince the board, and you know who really hated it? The board hated it the most. The board the investors were like, look, we didn't invest in you to be some crummy little lifestyle business. Like how are we ever going to get rich if you're only selling to investment banks? And how we convinced them was we said, look, this isn't forever positioning here. This is a living thing. So we're going to position this thing as CRM for investment banks. And once we get some good traction there, then we're going to use that to get to retail banking. And then we're going to be CRM for banking. And then once we're really good in retail banking, we're going to use that to get to insurance. And then we're going to be CRM for financial services. And if we do that, we're a giant company at that point. And at that point, maybe we'll go to be CRM for enterprise, and we're going to take those Siebel guys out at that point. So they agreed to do it. We did the repositioning, and it was absolutely transformational for the business. Like the biggest transformation was we didn't compete head to head against Siebel anymore. We'd go into the meeting and we'd say, hey, we're CRM for investment banks. And the bankers would go, wait, so don't you compete with Siebel? And we'd say, oh, Siebel. We love those guys. They're amazing. So big, so many customers, billions of revenue. They're fantastic. They're like the world's greatest general purpose CRM. If you run a call center in India or a manufacturing plant or I don't know what, not you, Wolf of Wall Street, you need something special. Let me show you this thing. And then we show them the thing, and we just cut them out of the deal right away. The result of this was we started to grow super fast. So we grew from about 2 million revenue to about a little under 80 million revenue in 18 months. And the end of this story is that Siebel got so sick of us kicking their tail all up and down Wall Street and then all over London and Switzerland and everywhere else that they came and acquired us for $1.7 billion. The board didn't think we were going to make any money. At the time, largest acquisition of a Canadian software company ever at the time. There's been bigger ones since. Anyways, I'm going to wrap this up. So here's what you need to think about. One, you need to think about positioning deliberately. We don't always do it. If you're finding that people are having a hard time figuring out what your stuff is all about, deliberate positioning is the thing you want to do. Secondly, if you are going to do positioning, you want to actually follow a process rather than just filling in the blanks. Here's some contact info for me. If you want to send me an email or follow me on Twitter or something, or my website is there. And then otherwise, I'm going to go to questions. Oh my gosh, there's a lot of questions. Hang on, I'm going to have to, wait while I deal with you people write long questions and I have a tiny little skinny blog. Can you share how positioning and branding yourself as an expert when you were starting out on your own? This is a question about how did I position myself? I'll tell you, it was not easy at the beginning because people don't know what positioning is. But I will say that if you are going out on your own, this is the same for companies or people or services, is the best way to get initial traction is to go narrow. Nobody wants to go narrow. It feels scary. But the easiest way to get initial traction is to go narrow. Like there's thousands and thousands and thousands of marketing experts in the world. But if you want a marketing expert that just does positioning for B2B tech companies, there's me. There's nobody else. You got to call me. Eventually you'll Google and you'll get to me and we'll have a meeting. That's how it works. But it's the same thing with software, right? Lots of CRM in the world, only one CRM for bankers, or at least there was at the time. That's the first one. How can we apply this to services and consultancy? Well, and this is a good question that follows on that one. It's kind of the same, but there's some tricks to it, because I've worked with a lot of services companies too. I mainly work with product companies, but I have done some services companies. The difference in services mainly is, you know how we start with competitive alternatives and then we get to unique features? Well, in a product, the features kind of are what they are. Like, you know what the features are, because the product only does these things, right? and you know, whereas if you're in services, theoretically, you could maybe do almost anything, right? You're just one hire away from doing different things. And so the trick when doing this positioning in services is you have to have some real discipline around what do we actually have as capabilities? So can we prove that we are excellent at doing this? Have we ever done it before? Do we have other customers that do it? If somebody said, prove that you're great at that, prove that you have experience at that, prove that that is a capability in your organization. So most of the time in services, it's narrowing down that list of unique capabilities is the hard part, because you got to really search your feelings on what's true there and what isn't. Once you can get past that, the rest of it is the same. And I've positioned services companies, and that is by far the hardest part. Let's see who else we got. Somebody noticed a typo on my slide. I'm so sorry. I can't fix it now. But you can, that's my engineer coming out. That's my excuse. How do you approach positioning for a new SaaS product that was replacing your old SaaS product, but the new product isn't yet differentiated? The only value, the value is only table stakes. So it's you replacing yourself. Well, if there's no difference in the value, I mean, you can't. Like, you got to give people a reason to go with the new one over the old one. So there must be a reason you built the new one. And I probably don't know enough about this situation to be able to answer this. I have seen companies do a very good job of, you know, they've got like the legacy product, and they've got a new product that's coming, and the initial new product that's coming does some things better and some things worse. That's generally what you've got. And so what you got to do is make sure you're really, really positioning the stuff that's better so that people understand why to make the leap. And if there's gaps, things that you want over here that you don't have over here, you either got to be willing to let go of the customers that really, really need that, or you show them the roadmap of how they're going to get it eventually. But just don't expect everybody to switch over all at once. You're going to get some of the people that are really, really put a high price on the value you can deliver with the good new stuff. And the other people that need the older stuff, they're going to come a bit later, and that's okay. Let's see. Where can we buy your book? On Amazon or Chapters or anywhere else you buy books. There's an audio book too, if you so it's Audible and all the audio book places. But yeah, pretty much anywhere you buy a book, you can buy it there. Let's see. Consultancy. At my company, I see marketing caring about positioning and sales coming along for the ride. But product hardly ever considers it. And as a result, there's a massive disconnect in what we say and do and what our roadmap shows. Do you have any advice on bridging the gap? I am glad you asked this question. In my opinion, a lot of weak positioning in companies, particularly companies that are in market and already selling and starting to scale a little bit, is there just isn't alignment across the team on what the positioning should be. So what you end up having is this problem where You know, it's like that. It's like that story where everybody's blindfolded and everyone's touching a different part of an elephant, and the guy holding onto the tail says it's a snake, and the guy holding the leg says it's a tree. You get a bit of that happening in companies where, you know, sales sees one piece of the pipeline, marketing sees another piece, customer success sees another piece. Sometimes you have a founder or a CEO that used to do all the selling, but now they only see certain big customers, and so they're seeing one piece that the other doesn't, and so there's this confusion about what are we, and each group is kind of like, well, we're this, of course, right, we're this, but the groups aren't in agreement. So the work that I do with clients is when we do this positioning exercise, I insist on having representation from all the groups in the room, because that's the only way we're going to fix it. So we need sales, marketing, product, customer success. Everybody, first of all, needs to agree that positioning is a thing worth looking at. And then they need to agree to come to the room. Usually this is why the CEO needs to drive this exercise. But I used to do it when I was the vice president of marketing. I used to drive it. But everybody needs to come to the room. And then we need to work through a structured exercise where everyone gets to get their piece out on the table and say, well, I don't see this in my work, or I see this in my work. We all have to discuss it, and when we all got to come to agreement. The only way we're really going to do that is if we follow a structured process. If we all just walk into the room and say, you know, I think the value is this, and then the other guy says, I think the value is this, and the gal over there is like, I think the value is this, well, then we all just come in with our opinions, and I like my opinion the best, and you're never going to get to agreement. Or maybe you will, because the CEO will pound the table and say, well, we're all doing it my way because it's my company, and then everybody will just skulk off, but they might not believe. So what we really need is everybody in the room working through a structured process that attempts to take the feelings out of it. And ideally, and the work that I do is I come in as the outside observer, facilitator, and expert, and that helps move things along. But you don't need to do it with me. You can do it with my book and have somebody in the team act as the facilitator and work through it. But you got to get everybody together. You need agreement and alignment. If you don't have that, then you'll get exactly what you're describing in this question, which is kind of mushy positioning because not everybody agrees. Let's see. I probably got time for like a couple more. Here's one. Would you offer the same advice regarding positioning methodology to companies trying to create a new market for a technology that allows new functionalities not previously possible, as opposed to competing in an existing market? Example, when somebody first invented, you know, the record player. Great question. So here's how this works. When you're positioning in a market, you essentially have there are three styles of positioning. So, and there's either I'm positioning in an existing market. If I'm positioning in an existing market, I have one of two choices. Either I'm attempting to go in and win the whole market. That's like where I say, look, I'm CRM. And that's basically like planting a flag and saying, Salesforce, watch your back. We're coming for you. We're going to, you know, it's like you showed up and you said, we're cola. And that means we're taking on Coke, man. And we will not rest until we own the entire market for Coke. And that sounds crazy. I mean, who could beat Coke at cola? Nobody, like not even Pepsi, man. And it sounds crazy because it is, right? Like it's almost never successful. And even when I worked at IBM and we were a giant company, we would not position ourselves directly in competition with an established market leader unless the market leader showed some significant weakness or there was something happening in the market where we thought we could take them on. But in regular course of business, we would never do that. Which brings us to style number two. Style number two is I position in an existing market, but I position in such a way where I say, you know what, I'm going to be the king of cola at some point, but I can't take on Coke right now. So I got to start somewhere. So I'm going to carve off a section of the market that is underserved by the market leader, and I'm going to win there. And then I'm going to expand out and take the rest of the market. So that's exactly my example with CRM for investment banks. We're like, we can't take on Siebel, but we can win in investment banking, and that's going to give us a foothold, and we're going to use that to get bigger and bigger, and eventually we'll take those guys on. And so it's like saying, I'm not Coke for everybody, I'm Coke for dogs, right? And Coke's not going to come and get me in the dog market. So the advantage of doing this is that it's easy in a lot of ways. Like, I don't have to explain to the market what CRM is. They know what it is. I just have to explain why this part of the market isn't served by the market leader, and I got something better for them there. So I'm not doing a lot of teaching in this example. Now, this brings me to the third way to do it, which is, and people come to me all the time, they're like, I've got something, it's so amazing, it's so different, the world has never seen it before, and if I position in any existing market category, it's actually going to undervalue the stuff that I do, so I should make a new market category. So that's like, instead of saying I'm Coke for dogs, you walk in and you say, or CRM for investment banks, you walk in and you say, I got a thing, it's amazing, it's a flu plumber. And customers say, what the heck's a flu plumber, man? I don't know what that is. And you say, I'm glad you asked. And then I got to go in this whole big blah, blah about what the flu plumber is. And, you know, there's this and there's that, but a flu plumber is neither of these things. It's actually this other thing. And this is a very, very difficult task to accomplish. So in order to do this successfully, you need a handful of things. One, generally, you need outside investment, and a lot of it. The only successful examples I can think of where companies have done this is where they've had hundreds of thousands of dollars of outside investment, and those investors were patient because it takes time. So there's an example in my book where I talk about a local one here, which is Mark Organ, who was the original founder of Eloqua and invented the market category of marketing automation. If you read that story, you know, he didn't think he was doing that in the beginning. What he did was he noticed the market was emerging and he built a tool for it. And then he followed that market as it got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and eventually was the king of it. Now, the history of Silicon Valley tells us that this is the riskiest way to position a product by far, because the history of technology is littered with absolute failures at attempting to do this, right? That is the reason why we use Google. We don't use Ask Jeeves. That's the reason why we use Facebook and we don't use MySpace. That's the reason why, you know, we're all sitting there with iPhones and BlackBerry is trying to stay alive. So there are very few examples of companies when they were small trying to create a new market category and then living long enough to actually own the category when they grow up. What's more common is companies that when they're small position themselves in a niche, and only when they get significant traction, Gainsight's a great example of this. They're a survey tool. They compete against SurveyMonkey. When they hit 200 million, then they were like, okay, we're giant, we dominate this space. We're now going to create a category that's bigger than just surveys. And we're going to call it engagement tools. And it's just going to blow everybody's mind about all the ways we could use surveys that you don't normally think of as surveys. And so they were successful doing that. But almost every example we see, the company did it when they were very, very big. So my recommendation is you only do it when you absolutely have to. And then if you absolutely have to, you better make sure you've got time and money to do it. We're 2 minutes too, so I think I'm going to wrap it up there. Thanks. There's a lot of questions I didn't get into, and I'm sorry about that, but I'm glad you're so engaged. And you guys can tweet at me on Twitter, or you drop me an email if you've got burning questions, and I will attempt to answer them probably on the weekend. And thanks so much for having me. This has been awesome. I'm going to turn it back over to Carla.
Okay, thank you, April. Thank you very much for your talk and taking that home. Position deliberately and follow a process. So I think a lot of people have picked up some good nuggets from this talk. As you have been chatting in the chat, this recording will be available on Unbound in Ventures platform. So if you missed anything, you can check it out there. In the chat as well, there is a forum if you are an Alberta-based entrepreneur, service provider, even just supporter of the ecosystem. Check out that link to see if you can get your free copy of a book. There are limited quantities. And again, thank you to our sponsors, Western Economic Diversification and Alberta Innovates. All right, thanks everybody. Have a great day.